So in your notes you'll see hospitality as a ministry makes sense. We're going to look at the hospitable body, the opportunity that we have to host Israelis. The models, there are various models that you can employ, and of course the results as well. First of all, the hospitable body. The body of Christ is wired for service. Now you guys, none of you are in your teens. You've hung around the body of Christ for a while, and you've noticed, if you're looking at sort of the gifts, the demographic of spiritual gifting, you'll see that most Christians have the gift of service. It is calculated, and I don't know who they are who did this, but they say that 2 to 4% of the body of Christ are wired for direct evangelism, face-to-face, if you will, confrontational evangelism. So if I were to say in a group of 100 Christians, how many of you are excited about the prospect of being repeatedly rejected on the basis of your sharing the gospel? 2 to 4 people would raise their hand and say, yeah, I really like that stuff. I love debate. I love confrontation. I mean, some people do, but they are the vast minority. 2 to 4. However, if I were to ask that same 100, how many of you like the idea of serving strangers through acts of kindness and through acts of service? About 90 or 95 will raise their hand. Okay? This is how the body is wired. Now, I love that because this is also how the world around us is wired. The world around us is filled with skin-wrapped packages of woundedness and need and loneliness and fear. They are people who need service. They are people who need love. And so what we're talking about in this ministry of hospitality is simply providing the kind of service that the world around us, especially Israelis, are longing for. So it's a beautiful hand-in-glove ministry. Now, the ministry of hospitality, this thing we're talking about, you doing, hosting, is simple, it's scriptural, it is strategic. Let's talk about that. First of all, it's very simple. You don't need seminary training. You don't have to hire a facility, presuming you have a home. You don't need to apply for consent from your local council or your local church. All you need is an open heart and an open home. That's all you need. It is simple. It is also scriptural. We're going to look at the scriptures and see how this is indeed endorsed by heaven. It's essential for spiritual leadership. In fact, if you don't have a hospitable nature, you are not qualified, according to 1 Timothy 3 and Titus chapter 1, you are not qualified for eldership. You are disqualified if you're not a hospitable person. And so this is something that is required for leadership. We see in the Bible example after example of godly people hosting strangers. We see people hosting everybody from paupers and prisoners to prophets to God himself. Check out Genesis 18. You'll see somebody actually hosting God. All right? And hosting was a life-saving ministry. Now, what you're providing by inviting Israelis into your home typically isn't saving lives necessarily. It might ultimately, through the spiritual salvation of grace by faith in Jesus. But in the first century, when you were hosting people, you were saving lives. Remember, most people were traveling by foot, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months at a time. In their travel, if they didn't have a lot of money and they couldn't afford lodging, they would camp by the side of the road where they would very typically be robbed or beaten, sometimes killed. And so when you were offering hospitality, you were offering a life-saving ministry. This is why the Bible actually heralds certain people by name. I mean, some people are named in the Bible because of their hospitality. Remember Gaius. Gaius was someone who was hospitable. And we know about him 2,000 years later because of his hospitality. There's actually a book in the Bible written just about hospitality. I'll leave that to you to figure out. It is simple, it's scriptural, and it's also strategic. We are ambassadors. Where do you find that? 2 Corinthians 5. We are ambassadors for Messiah. What do ambassadors do? They need to understand their audience. They need to seek opportunities to represent their kingdom. We are ambassadors from another kingdom, an unseen, invisible kingdom, a mystery kingdom, bringing a mysterious message from a mysterious, unseen king to the kingdom of this world. Boy, we are more ambassadors than anybody on the face of the planet. And so we need to understand the people we are reaching. And that's why we're taking some time now to understand Israelis in New Zealand or whatever country you are hosting Israelis in. So let's talk about that. First of all, these guys are coming to us. Now, this is an amazing opportunity, isn't it? We're talking about the opportunity that God has given us now. They are coming to us. We don't have to go to them. In fact, in New Zealand now, if you're from another country watching this, I feel sorry for you because here in New Zealand, the whole world's coming here. You should check us out because we're pretty beautiful down here. But the whole world is coming to New Zealand. It's kind of a candy store for missions, including tens of thousands of Israelis. But wherever you are, Israelis are coming to us, and therefore all we have to do is invite them in. They're also searching for answers. The Israelis who are traveling, this is a phenomenon. There are tens of thousands every year who are traveling all over the world. They have just finished their mandatory military service, most of them. And boy, they're looking for answers to life's most important questions right now. So it's a very strategic time to be meeting them. They are away from the pressures of home, pressures of rabbi, pressures of family, pressures of business, pressures of school. They're in a much more relaxed and open environment, state of mind. They're in discovery mode. In fact, they're looking to discover a culture, a people. They want to know about your faith, for the most part. They're interested in your worldview and your religious paradigms. They're asking questions that they would never ask on the streets of Haifa or Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. It's astounding the opportunity we have. They're actually anticipating personal interaction on matters of spirituality. Now, I'll be honest, that is not true of everybody. But most are this way. When my wife and I first came to New Zealand on a motorcycle trip in 2007, we stayed in backpacker facilities, hostels. And every single day, every morning and evening, we were surrounded by international young people, typically millennials, who were initiating spiritual conversations. I mean, it was amazing. Everyone we met seemed to have some kind of comment or question about something spiritual. It might have been wacky spiritual, but it was spiritual. And it is true also among the Israelis you're going to be meeting. They're actually, for the most part, anticipating some sort of interaction. By the way, they know who you are. Okay, they know you're a Christian. They may not know what that means, but they know that you are religious, that you're not Jewish for the most part, and that you are spiritual people. And so they're cool with that. They're staying in your home. They're anticipating a conversation. They're also on a budget. Now, that's a good thing because they really need accommodation and you're providing it. They are relaxed and unhurried. Again, relaxed and unhurried are not typical adjectives in Israel. If you've ever been to Israel, you know that it's a very frenetic, chaotic manner of life. It's a difficult life. There are many fears and there are many frustrations. And they're living in a place where their neighbors want them dead. When they kiss their kids goodbye in the morning and put them on a bus, they don't know if they're going to see them in the evening. It's a tough environment. And so the fact that they are much more relaxed and open is significant. Also, if they're in a beautiful part of the world, such as in New Zealand, they're hearing from the Creator through the creation. I'll tell you something, folks. You know, well, maybe you don't know this because you're New Zealanders who might be immune to the beauty of this country, but I, as an outsider coming in, and Michael can attest to this as well, we just wept every day. We're driving through the beauty of this country, and these Israelis are hiking day after week after month through the beauty of the Creator's creation. You cannot help but be moved and inspired by it. The Creator is speaking through His creation. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. And so, in this kind of position, they're much more open to hearing about the Creator behind this beauty. Now, this may look a little bit creepy. They're vulnerable, dependent, and receptive. The reason I write this is because, not so we can manipulate them or take advantage of them, but it's important to understand they are very vulnerable. Remember, Israelis expect to be dismissed, rejected, even hated when they leave Israel. One of the questions we hear often from Israelis in our homes is not, why do you love us? But why don't you hate us? That should make you cry. They're so expecting to be hated and rejected that they're in this vulnerable position. And so this actually works for us because we actually love them. And when we demonstrate that love, it's so disarming and so inspiring and provocative. There it is, Romans 11:11. So in this place of vulnerability and receptivity, the gospel is presented in a much more opportune environment. They're in your home, and they want to discover you. You are a very different culture. Wherever you are in the world, you're different from Israelis. And so this is kind of a cultural discovery time for them as well. Let's look at the models. This is very simple. In terms of the networks that are available around the world, there are various models. For example, there is one network, which is basically a Christian ministry. Its developer is a believer, and he created this network purely as a Christian ministry. There's no money involved whatsoever. It's not a business. It is merely a Christian ministry. And therefore, this is one network which you can sign up for. There's another network, this is fairly new in this year of 2020, which is kind of an Airbnb style of ministry. In other words, it's a business. And if you know about Airbnb, you basically have an app on your phone, and you look up a place where you want to stay that night, and you book in, and you pay a fee. And that's exactly what this is. This is actually, there's a certain genius to this, because Israelis are very used to this kind of application on their phone. They're very used to booking in this kind of way. So this is a new network, which is Airbnb style. But then there's just independent. The hosting ministry has become so popular around the world that some hosts are just becoming known by Israelis. And so there are hosts out there that are not part of any network. You can't find them online. They're just known by word of mouth. And you can become that person. If you want to kind of start slowly, you can just sort of invite a few overflows from other people who are in the networks. And lo and behold, you also will become famous in Israel. And others will come to your home because of word of mouth. And then finally, the results. Like it or not, you're going to become popular. I know it's hard for some of you, but you're going to be very, very popular. I want to actually read this to you. This is from a host family in New Zealand who have hosted hundreds, if not thousands, of Israelis in their home. She writes, this is a couple, a group has formed on Facebook that plans to bring us, all 7 of us in our family, as a family to Israel to, quote, repay us and thank us for what we have done for them in hosting in our home and sharing our home and hearts for Shabbat meals. Apparently, the group began here in our home during the summer and has grown to 400 members. So these are 400 previous guests in their home in New Zealand who have formed this Facebook group. Most of these we know personally, but there's a growing number of strangers, some believers, who are also joining this group. They are raising $40,000, and they've raised half of that so far. I'm not going to read it all, I'll just read a part. Not only are people contributing financially, but they're also offering accommodation, tour guides, Jeep trips, factory visits, etc., etc. They just want to bless this family because they blessed them. Now you might be thinking, all they did was open their home. Yeah, but that's a big deal to these people. It's a really big deal, especially when you're expecting to be hated and rejected. Going on, we've been told that this is so great, okay? We've been told that there will be around 200 people at the airport to meet us. Forgive me, I'm crying over this. And as we have maintained contact with many of those we have hosted, we look forward to renewing friendships with them all and sharing Shabbat and other meals again with people who entered our home as strangers and left as family. Well, I should go on to say, they interviewed this couple on national television in Israel. These are hosts just like you, who were so loved, gosh, I'm breaking up over this, forgive me, who were so loved and so well received by their guests that their guests were just looking for any opportunity to bless them. And they were overwhelmed. This family was overwhelmed. You can imagine going from household to household, parents of these young people saying, thank you so much, loving them, feeding them, hugging them, and taking them, all around Israel. They were exhausted. They needed therapy after this trip. But are you getting the point? You're going to be popular because what you're doing is unheard of among Israelis traveling. There are articles being written. Sociologists, psychologists are writing about the phenomenon of the Israeli backpackers and actually Christians hosting them in their homes. There's actually articles being written about this, studies being conducted on this phenomenon. There will be provocation. There will be the positive provocations of Romans 11:11. I'm sad to say there has been negative provocation as well. Now, this is hard to talk about. But the reason we're sharing this is because, we don't know who everybody is who's hosting. We do some vetting, but not much. And the fact is there are some who are hosting for the wrong reasons. There are predators who are hosting. There are people, we've heard stories about Israelis who have been in homes of Christians, and the Christians were serving them pork roasts and pork meals and saying things like, well, you're not under the law anymore, so just eat this pork. There's stories of people who were pressed and pushed to receive Jesus or to speak in tongues or to do something that was totally against not just their beliefs, but their understanding. It was confusing. It was very unsettling. These are insensitive, foolish people, unwise people. And there has been negative provocation. So this is why we have seminars like this, is to help you understand who Jewish people are and how to create an environment which is welcoming to them. There will be gratitude and more open doors, as I just shared from this amazing story of this couple. And there will be new strategies worldwide. This is happening right now. That this is one reason we have created this film, is so that host networks that are popping up all over the place right now. There are 5 countries, just in our own personal network of ministries, that are launching hosting networks. It's very exciting because Israelis are traveling everywhere. And so this opportunity is everywhere.
So with the Christian ministries, of either being under a Christian ministry or independent, is there any pros and cons? Or?
If I understand it right, is there any benefit to one or the other kinds of models? Mm-hmm. So we talked about the Christian ministry, we talked about Airbnb and independent. It really depends on your values and your vision for ministry. For example, some Christians are off-put by the thought that there's any kind of fiscal exchange or fiscal responsibility. And so the Airbnb thing doesn't suit them. They don't like the idea of charging Israelis for something you're giving away for free. And so they would go with the Christian ministry aspect of it. Some, however, think, oh, that's a really good strategy, and I like that strategy, because in one way, the Airbnb thing is disarming, because when Israelis are coming into if you will, a Christian network, it's a little bit, why are they inviting me in for no money? That's kind of weird. You see what I mean? And so the Airbnb thing is like, oh, okay, this makes sense. I do this all the time. And so it kind of pushes down the anxiety factor for many Israelis. And some hosts like that. The independent thing is, if you just want to kind of get your feet wet, what we suggest is, let's say you were going to host in Christchurch, you would let other hosts know who are networked that you're going to be hosting. And when they're overburdened or someone just called and said, hey, I'm at your doorstep, can I come? And you already have 4 people in your home, they're going to call you and say, hey, do you have an opportunity here? And it may not be that night, it might be.
They have 3 people in Christchurch to do that. That basically said, look, we don't want to do this regularly, but if you have overflow, can you pass their names on can you pass our contact information on? And they do. They posted them and loved it. And the other thing, by the way, is we've had people that said, we don't yet know if we like this. Rather than sign up for a network, could you send us some people so that we can try it out before we sign up? And it's actually a really nice thing.
It's a great idea.
And several people have gone ahead and signed up. And one person said, now that I got to do it, I love it, but I'm not ready to do this full time right now. So I'm going to hold off for a while, but had that opportunity. So it's good.
May I ask, it may not be appropriate at this point in time, but it would be a concern to me. How do you deal with people that come as a couple that want to sleep together, whether it be 2 males or 2 females or boy and girlfriend? I do have a standard that I won't have people that are not married sleeping together in my home, and it always has been that way, and I'm uncomfortable that I don't want to appear self-righteous, nothing like that, but I just am not I'm not comfortable about it.
Totally understand. You're dealing with it exactly right. Romans 14, happy is he who doesn't condemn himself by that which he allows. Whatsoever is not of faith is sin. You have to be led by your conscience. And therefore, if it is inappropriate, according to your faith and practice, to allow people to sleep together who aren't married, you must not do that. And here's the cool thing. The Israelis get that. And they're totally fine with it. They understand. By the way, they've done some research. Israelis are good researchers. They have surfed the web, and they know exactly what this is all about, and they get it, that some are going to say no. So what you do is, when you get on the network, you actually put in your profile that unmarried people will be sleeping in separate rooms. You can put that.
Can you do that in this day and age now, with lack of freedom of speech and being taken to court for discrimination, all this sort of...
Well, let's test it. And I will visit you in jail, Heather. Yes, you can.
It is very real, and I'm on my own, and so I'm more vulnerable as I've got nobody else living in my home.
Look, I would not put no LGBTQ on your profile. I would not put that. Right. No. However, and I would hope you would not reject LGBTQ people either. But
provided they knew the rules.
So one of the things we're going to talk about, forgive me because it'll be said twice, but just for your sake, laying out the rules clearly is extremely important. And you have 2 opportunities to do it. You have it on your profile in the network, on the app, and then you have it when they arrive. We do this in our facilities. When every Israeli arrives, we have thousands, but every single one gets a tour, and every single one gets the rules. Right. And so no one can claim ignorance. It's just like Romans chapter 3, No one can claim ignorance. They all get it. And they're fine with it. Because good grief, you're offering hospitality. You're opening your home. And so they're not going to argue with you.